Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody's up bright and early, as I see, for a great session this morning, which I heard a lot of people are interested about to learn, which is something, a new concept, and we're pretty excited about that. So whilst we're sort of rearranging the stage here, what the idea is, let's get an operator and an owner together in pairs and talk a little bit about how they got together, why it's functioning, and where they have their internal challenges, and how do that relationship affect relationship with other owners and other brands, and hear a little bit about their experiences working together, coming together, and in particular also where they had to go over and above contractual arrangements and find compromises. So that was a quick rearrangement. Hardly gave me time to introduce the session. Great, so let's get started. Ladies first, Amy McPherson, President and Managing Director Europe for Marriott Hotels International. Peter Schitti-Pokovian, President of CH Group. First table, please, Amy. Thank you very much. Peter, welcome. Wolfgang Neumann, President and CEO of Residor Hotel Group, Brussels. Hello, Wolfgang. Together with Fred Debrem, Managing Director and co-founder of Algonquin. Federico Gonzalez Tejera, CEO of NH Hotels. Good morning. And Ricardo Dallalio from AXA, Sector Head of Alternative and Special Situations. Welcome, Amy, gentlemen. Contrary to the program, Jean-Philippe Comet unfortunately is in hospital, but I understand he's well taken care of, and Fred kindly agreed to step in into the session. So, as you can see from the title, it's discuss partnerships and how they structure their communication and nurture relationships for both sustainable growth and the further development. So, why are you guys sort of sitting in pairs? And I'd like to start with giving sort of Amy and Peter a couple of minutes to explain a little bit, why are you here, guys? Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. I actually inherited the relationship with Peter. We started with Peter Schitti-Pokovian back in 2000. And when I came into my role in 2009, we were at a critical point in the relationship. We had wanted to grow strategically in Russia with our select service brand Courtyard. And we found a great partner in Peter, but at the time that we started the relationship, we weren't sure that Russian law really recognized management contracts the way they do in Western Europe. So we negotiated a different deal structure. And so I'll let Peter talk a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you, Amy. In fact, we started to be interested in hotel operations together with my partners in the beginning of 2000. And, you know, by my first education, I'm space engineer and mathematician. Because of that, I made a table with all the brands and some criteria. And after that, I visit all the brands and I talk with people and I try to find a proper partner. And it shows me that the contact with the people from Marriott was most easiest and most better than anybody in that moment, than anybody else. And we start our cooperation, and I like to say that it was not easy, because honestly speaking, we have not been experienced enough to understand all the requirements. But later on, it comes more and more easier, and we find out that the key question of cooperation between owners and managers is a relationship with people. And we spend quite a lot of time to invest in this kind of relations. You know, somebody can say that, you know, if you are going to build your first hotel, are you not afraid to come to the huge, big organization? But we look at it in another approach. You know, of course, Marriott is like a big ship which are going, nevertheless what is happening. But when you are coming closer, you see that on this ship you can see people. And when you start to speak with these people, to cooperate with these people, you find out that everything is possible, in fact. And every time we can find out the balance of our interests. And for us today, of course, it's better to cooperate with Marriott. We like all the brands, we respect all the brands, and we like maybe in future to work with other brands. But up to now, to work with people from Marriott is more convenient for us because we know everybody and they know us.
That's great. Peter, thank you. I take away anything is possible, Amy. That's great news with Marriott. So Wolfgang and Fred, why don't you take it away?
Peter, I noted that you want to work with other brands. It's good to hear. I'm very proud to introduce the Carlson Residor Alconquin partnership. It's a partnership which goes back 10 years. It's a strong owner and asset manager, continental Europe, and many highs in the relationship, but in any good relationship there are also lows, like in any marriage, and we worked through those. We have today a portfolio of 3 hotels, which is growing because Alconquin is expanding. The interesting element for you to know is that there used to be a portfolio of 10 hotels, and Residor approached Alconquin 2 years ago, and we said that we had 7 leases with Alconquin, which we signed in our expansion phase, which were unprofitable, non-strategic in France, and we wanted to exit those leases. So we sat down with Alconquin and negotiated a win-win partnership agreement where we could exit the leases, avoid the losses which we would have made in the future years, avoided the capital obligations for the future years, and allowed Alconquin to optimize the asset value in a different way. Good example of how you can negotiate a win-win agreement when you really pursue mutual objectives and understand what you want to jointly achieve. Today we have 3 assets together, as I mentioned. In Residor Blue is the biggest upper upscale brand in France. We have Paris, Nice and Lyon together with Alconquin, and Lyon is an interesting example which we want to tell you a little bit more about. But before we do this, I hand over to Fred to give you a little bit the angle of the relationship.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Of course, these last 2 to 3 years have been a bit difficult. We have talked a lot, and clearly coming from 10 properties to 3 properties in 3 years have been tough. But first of all, maybe it's the good moment to precise that Algonquin is not the only shareholder of the structure who owns these properties we have together. We are in this structure alongside with a big life insurance company, BNP Paribas Assurance, and with General Electric Real Estate. And definitely, if these institutional investors like the asset class, definitely they don't know very well how to manage the assets. And that's where Algonquin has had a good role to play in the relationship we had together, because we own and operate 35 hotels, and out of these 35 hotels, we have half of them under management contract. And definitely our role has been to explain why this tough situation where you wanted to exit the leases we had together was maybe a good opportunity for us to improve the value of the portfolio, and that was what we have done together, and was a great success.
Yeah. The other example which we wanted to share with you is a live case which we're doing at the moment together in Lyon, the Radisson Blu Lyon, which we jointly agreed to have a master refurbishment program of some 23 million. It's an immeuble Grand Hauteur, a high-rise building in the center of Lyon, which we are repositioning, and we are investing together 60 Alconquin, 40 Residor, jointly agreed on the objective of this refurbishment. 1, to really optimize the commercial performance of the asset. 2, to meet the brand standards. 3, to really minimize the capital ticket. Put together a team, agreed on how we're going to go about Alconquin, the relationship locally with the authorities. We know commercially how to position the hotel. And closed the hotel in December. We'll reopen it in February next year. So much to the rumor that owner and operator cannot undertake big projects together. It's going very well. It's on time and under budget, and we look forward to reposition this hotel in Lyon in the future.
Just a question for you then, Wolfgang, on that one. What happened to the contract then? Was that kind of where you said, okay, we're going to do this work, do the capex, do the repositioning? What was kind of? Did you then extend the contract? Did you extend certain, guarantees, commitment? What was the motivation for owner to go through that obviously painful period of no income for 15 months? What was the trade-off?
That was actually all linked into the exit asset management transaction of leaving the 7 hotels, and we jointly agreed on that package. It was all one deal. The contract continued to exist, and it's really a good example where we approached this project and said, how are we ever going to get this hotel refurbished on top of exiting 7 hotels? And it took us a year in negotiations and really understanding each other and asking a lot of questions and listening to each other to understand really what the drivers for us were and what the drivers for Fred were.
Yeah, we just terminated 7 contracts we had together, so definitely it was a difficult decision to take together. When you are BNP Paribas Assurance or when you are G Real Estate and when you enter into a contract, long-term contract, and when 7 years later, when you have left 20 years of contract, you say, okay, you know what, we're going to terminate the contract and try to operate the hotels on ourselves better than what it has been done by Residor, such a company than Residor. Definitely, it's quite a challenge. But we succeeded in doing that because we thought that the value of these 7 little assets we had together could be probably better without the brand of Residor, which were not well adapted to the little city where we were present together. We thought it was a good opportunity to have other brands on these assets and to sell properly these assets, and what we have done successfully in 2013. And definitely we can say it was a success because we sold it and created 25% of value above the last valuation we had on these assets.
Okay, great. Federico, Ricardo, who wants to give it start? Federico, you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity today. We're going to share, obviously, the relation between AXA and NH. Let me just say 2-3 things before we pass the word. First, I think this deal and this occasion was particularly important for me because actually I had joined the company December 2012, and this is a deal that we closed in the first semester of 2013. And actually, before going into these discussions and being new to hospitality, I thought first that selling a hotel was easy. Second, I thought that selling it to the right person was also easy. Well, I discovered that none of the two were right. And I think there were 3 things, that I think is what we want to share. And actually, after the deal, we have discussed a lot about that. I think there are 3 elements that are important to understand any of the deals we have done, and actually the relationship we have today. The first is what the company is. The second one is not only the company, but what is the moment in which the company is at that moment. And third, obviously, what is the asset and what are you looking to get from that deal? I think from a company point of view, from those of you who do not know that much, NH is an urban chain without a focus on urban destinations, business hotels. We have 400 hotels. And actually, one of the good things is we have 25% of the rooms are owned by us, so we are 25% of the times we behave as owners. 25% of the occasions we are managing, so we need to behave as managers, and another 50% of the time we are leasing, so we behave kind of in the middle. So I think with that experience and that moment and that company background, I think is what is the moment the company was facing when we are starting this deal. And I think the moment was particularly interesting because there was a new management team. We were thinking about how to build the future, how to make a new 5-year plan. But actually at that moment we had a cash issue. So we were considering to sell a trophy asset that was the Grand Hotel Krasnapolski in Amsterdam. Big amount of money, not only big amount of money, but huge amount of technical complexity because it's a complex asset, very old asset that needed a significant renovation, and an asset that we want to keep for the future because actually in our 5-year plan is not only to overcome the obstacles we had those years, but actually to grow beyond and to recover presence in the market. And that's where, and just as a personal experience, I think during those 3 months I met a significant amount of companies of all kinds, people who are extremely willing to help you at a huge discount or at a very high yield, people who do not want to help you that much, and I guess we all face situations like that. And I think we were fortunate to see and to meet AXA and the team And just 3 words I want to leave, and I pass the word, is three things that we found extremely important that we keep using in any deal we do. First is the team. Really, who is going to be dealing with this in the future? So it's not only the first and the second phase who is coming to the deal, who is going to sign, but actually who is going to be operating and managing this relation. The second is the trust. I think for me, what I was looking when we were looking to any of the operator or of the potential owners was, can I trust these guys? Beyond the first phase or beyond the second meeting, can I trust the relation we are going to have in the future? And the third is transparency. So it's the 3 T's, because transparency, not everything is fantastic, not everything is great. And there are moments where there are doubts. There are moments where in the middle of the deal, you are not sure if the deal is going to come across or if it's going to happen in the due timings. So you need to have enough transparency from both sides to be able to put the issues on the table and say, hey, if we need to divorce, let's divorce now before it becomes worse. And I think we found the 3 things in working with AXA. And not only because of that asset deal, but actually we found in AXA a partner that is an expert in hotels now, but actually is a great partner for development. And actually that was the balance that we were looking for, not only someone that would help us fix the issue in that asset, but actually someone that would help us develop the company for the future, and that's why we are happy.
Absolutely. I think to connect to this, even before we started looking at this great opportunity, and I would say venture with NH, we wanted to understand the new NH. Of course, through the crisis, there were a number of issues, especially on the leverage. Met Federico a few times, even before considering the asset, and the idea is to understand his vision, where he wanted to take the company forward, to understand his needs. And there were obviously needs of recapitalization, which was going to finance this vision. So within this context, we looked at what was a not obvious asset, great location, complex asset in terms of what needs to be done. His team was very professional and thorough in their views. On our side, we are, and not people know it, that AXA is a very big developer across Europe. We have a pipeline at the moment of 5 billion of development we are doing. We have a team of architects in France and the UK that actually gets their hands dirty into this process. And therefore, it was quite easy, I think, to discount a lot all the matters relating to the asset, instead of trying to understand before and trying to understand how you could create value by aligning our interest. I think that was the key part of the relationship, underwriting the growth, helping them, I think, during a situation where capital was very important, and I think the timing of execution was key. And now I think we're very happy about the way we're working together and trying to bring back the Crown upholstery to its great splendor, which is what deserved, especially given the absolutely unique location within the Amsterdam market.
Great. Okay, thank you. So after we had this introduction why we all like each other and or work with each other so well, give me a good example, because one of the things I'm asking myself always is, how does a brand manage multiple relationships once you have an opportunity coming up where you kind of have to make a decision on who to run with? And the other way around, from an owner's perspective, you have an existing relationship with your counterpart at this table and something else is coming up and you have to make a decision on who to go with. Does your existing well-working relationship is actually something which is beneficial, or is it sometimes a conflict where you say, I know this guy so well, I'm not quite sure whether for this project he's the right partner, but do I give him the benefit of the doubt? Or how openly is these sort of discussion going, both internally and then between either, not necessarily obviously now between the two of you, but where you say with different partners? How is that working for you in terms of a conflict or not?
Well, as it relates to our relationship with Peter, as I said, when I came in, we were 9 years into the relationship. We had already done 8 projects together, and we both were at a point, the relationship was evolving. And as Peter said, it wasn't always perfect, but we were always talking. We both had individual goals that we were trying to achieve. From Peter's standpoint, he was getting the hotel experience to ultimately run hotels himself. And from our standpoint, we were trying to get a deal structure that was more in line with what our goals were in terms of transitioning it from a lease. And so what we did is we evolved very recently our relationship to a franchise relationship. So the last 3 courtyards that we did with Peter in Kazan, Irkutsk, and St. Petersburg, we are going to flip to franchise. And so there's mutual benefit to each of us, and it gets past the challenge, becomes an opportunity in the relationship because we both now reset the goals in terms of what we want to do moving forward, and we both see value in the change.
As I said before, for us it was very comfortable to work with Marriott because of the very good contacts with people. You cannot imagine, sometimes it was so important for us that when I called to one of the senior guy in Marriott, Rainer Sachau, and say, Rainer, I need you, he fly to me in 1 hour, you know, and we sit, we decide everything, and he fly back. When you have this kind of relationship, a lot of things is possible. And what I like to say, when appears the idea to flip our management agreement with Marriott to franchising, it was new for us. We have been a little bit afraid, of course, but nevertheless, we agreed with Marriott that they will help us to build this kind of organization, and with this kind of approach, we will be able to do together much more than it was possible with the previous model, right. What was also kind of balance of our interests. And what I like very much in our relationship is that when there is any question, we never say to each other, you know, this is like it is. It will be never changed. No. Even very common questions we are discussing every time like new, and every time we will be able to find the balance of our interest. This is the most important basis to go to the future together successfully.
Which is kind of what Wolfgang and Fred were evolving to, what they went through after 7 years into a contract, right? So how do you guys sort of deal with that sort of conflict or non-conflict situation, if there is one?
First of all, to come back to your question, Carlsen Residor is a relationship company. We are very close to our owners. 49% of our owners have more than one hotel with us. So that shows that they actually believe in us and that we're able to build up a relationship. Now, you cannot only work with existing owners, you need to also bring in new owners. And there you need to differentiate between the emerging markets and the more mature markets. But we want to build on existing relationships. Fred and I were talking this morning, and one of the things we learned out of our relationship is you sign a contract, 20 years, right? But things change in these 20 years. The market changes, strategies changes. And I think the strength of a relationship is if in that situation then you have the honesty, the trust, as Federica was saying, to sit down and talk about these changes and find a win-win solution in response to these changes. When we signed all these agreements in France at the time in secondary markets, we thought that makes a lot of sense. Well, in the benefit of hindsight, we looked at that again and said, no, it didn't make so much sense. You know, companies also make mistakes, and you face it.
But not one
and you face it with your partner together.
Your mouth, Wolfgang, what are you actually saying? We should have shorter contract terms so there is more flexibility?
We like to sign 20-year contracts, but we're also flexible and realize that in some situations it requires a shorter duration. So I wouldn't say no.
So do our contracts need changing in the sense that they may have a longer term still, or a long term, but have some sort of parameters in their tests for both parties to look at it? Without, I mean, we don't have a banker on the panel, but it's going to be interesting how that's going to affect any financing. But is that what you're saying as well, which I understand, but I think is a valid point. Obviously, the times where you had, you know, some brands do 50, 60, 70-year management agreements, whether that is actually over and whether that doesn't really reflect where the current market is and how quickly the world is changing.
Maybe what I can add to what you said is that first of all, when you are doing business in hospitality business, location and quality of the asset is of the essence. But secondly, what I appreciate after 10 years of experience with an operator is the fact that you know very well the people you are dealing with. So clearly you have experienced the good times, but also the bad times. You know how people behave. and you can construct with them a stronger relationship than what you had before, because you know how they behave when it's hard. And definitely, it makes me think that I like to imagine the fact that I can develop further with Residor, even if we experience very bad times together and very, very strong and difficult negotiation together. So definitely the fact that you can change a 20 years contract after 7 years because the economical environment is not anymore the same, or because the strategy has changed. If you can listen to each other and understand how you can, in good faith, change the parameters of the deals and create value for both parties, definitely it is something that makes me think that we can develop further the relationship together in the next years.
Okay. For Enrico, how is you mentioned the Amsterdam example, the Krasnopolski example. Give us a little bit of a background. Did that sort of, you spend a lot of time obviously discussing, negotiating, agreeing, CapEx plan, and I mean, no contract is perfect. So what happened after you've signed? Did all things happen like you were planning it, or did you have to then get back together again and say, look, we've planned X, Y, Z, it's not working, how are we going to deal with it? And how did that communication go?
Yeah.
How did that discussion go?
Well, actually, I think the answer is going to sound fake, that is, because it's going to say, yes, everything has worked, but actually it has. However, I would not have had a problem if it would not have. Okay, I think the point is, the teams worked extremely detailed, and as I said, in an extremely complex asset. So I think we knew very well the asset, and I think AXA spent a huge amount of time in doing the assets, but technically it is a complicated asset. So I think since we signed, everything is in timing, and I think what has been key is the two teams and the two companies have put very concrete responsibles and alerts in the system if things are not coming in due time. And I think that is what is more important is, I think we should all be realistic. Not all the projects happen on time, not all the projects happen on budget, but I think what we signed gave enough, if you want, width to be able to deviate, okay, in some of the variables we negotiated. But I think what is good is we have established the communication systems between the two companies at different levels where, sometimes eventually we may get feedback on something from AXA, we are not getting the right response, or we are not giving the right response because we are working in other projects, and there's kind of an alert of the system saying, guys, you are late. So if you delay this, we will delay later on. And I think that process works. So I think once you have established the process, then there is no issue. I think the worst is if the process is not well defined and well established with clear owners in both sides in both companies, then the crisis comes. I think if in a given moment one amount is not the same, or we didn't think of something in the CapEx plans, then it's fine. I mean, the system is able to learn. I think provided we have the right system, I mean, we are all human. We can all of us make mistakes or deviations from budgets. And the key thing is to have the right timing and the right process to make sure that we can discuss that in the due time. No?
For AXA, similar?
Yeah, I mean,
statement?
Before acquisition, obviously we try to cover as much ground as possible within the timing and within the complexity of the process. In that process, we expressed obviously where we saw the risks, but our development team spent a lot of time with Federico's development team to try to share at least what the potential concerns were. Now, in any development or development process, there are bound to be delays, there are bound to be differences because it's normal, it's part of the business. To be prepared for it and have the right teams that since the beginning have the right rules of engagement, that's what we try to put together ahead of acquisition, in order to make sure that they engage with these rules and understand each other's skills and limitation, and have regular communication through bi-weekly meetings and red flags, as Federico said, which we can escalate on in order to take decisions where things were not as expected. clearly minimizes the issues, right? So that, I think, putting together two professionals, it probably helps a lot. It's not something we invented in a day, our development skills, and we're happy to share it and with their team, which is a strong development team, to make probably one of the best in class to do this deal.
Okay, great. In between, we do have mics on the floor, so any questions to any of the panelists, please do raise your hands. There are mics going in the room, so anytime, and I think I'll recognize if someone's making a photo. I don't think that was making a flashlight to be getting hand over the mic. Anyway, so one of the other questions is obviously in the relationships is sort of the do's and don'ts. I think the do's we have heard what has worked, how to do things, how to jointly grow together. What are kind of the don'ts? Where you're saying, look, if you are in a relationship with obviously either an owner or an operator, in my experience, these are the don'ts. Don't do this with us, or don't do this with someone of our peers. Amy, do you want to give this a go?
For us, a don't in terms of dealing with our partners is don't assume bad intent. So if there is a miscommunication, and we're not understanding each other, sit down, look the person in the eye and have a conversation about it. Because I think sometimes when relationships go south is when people walk into it saying, he did that on purpose, or she did that on purpose,
right.
and that always sets you off on a bad. But so from our standpoint, we show up. We want to spend the time personally to make sure that communication is good and trust stays.
So we heard about people a lot, both from Peter, Federico, that people, do you change people during a process if you realize it's working well or it's not working so well?
Well, yeah.
How rigid are you about developer X or asset manager Y has to do that negotiation?
Well, we take a team-based approach anyway
Right.
to our partner relationships. So not everything flows through me, because that's going to take forever. If that's the case. Also, if I don't have the great relationship with the person, if somebody else has a better relationship with that person, I'm going to take advantage of that. We're going to take advantage of that, because then we'll both have a better
So very much
experience.
client, customer
Yep.
driven.
And then Peter will get a faster response because he knows more people in the organization. So.
Yes, it's true. And more than that, I like to say that Marriott team knows all of my team, and my team knows Marriott team. So it's never connection person to person. It's team to team, And in this kind of combination, which is much more flexible than a combination person to person, every time there is a possibility to find something. What I like to add to say, it's very difficult to say in our relationship what we don't like to do. We like to do everything, but...
In hindsight, from the past, to your experience dealing with 8 hotels, is there something you've learned which you did in the beginning and you wouldn't do again?
Yes.
And you wouldn't advise people to do again or to do in the first place?
Yes, I can say that it seems to me that I will be less stubborn, because before I was insisting on my opinion, and later on I find out that, these people are saying something not for nothing. They are right in that direction, in that direction, in that direction. So as more experience we are getting, as more better we understand each other. Right. But when you ask us what don't to do, I like to say, don't stay in the same position. Don't use the same tools. Move to the future. This is the most important thing.
Wolfgang, Fred?
Maybe 2 points. One general, I would say to general relations, don't pretend you're perfect. I think what we pride ourselves is saying, okay, there's a mistake, we live up to it, we listen to our partners and correct it. That's a general attitude which I think is important. And I think in terms of the Alconquin negotiations, it's a little bit what Peter was saying. We went in with a clear set of objectives, wanted to negotiate this exit agreement, had our Carlson Residor objectives, and knew exactly how we're going to drive the value. And what our asset management team learned is that we need to stay flexible and really adapt that strategy, because what we learned in the process about Alconquin to a certain degree surprised us, and then we had to adapt our strategy. And I think this flexibility is critical, that you constantly revisit the plan, your objectives, adapt it. Obviously, you have key objectives which you want to achieve. That's just what Fred did. But I think that allowed us to strike the deal.
That's true. You know indeed the target, but you don't know the parameters. that you will finally have in the final result. So definitely communication and adaptation are two qualities you need to have. And communication is listening, indeed, because definitely, especially when you are trading with a public company such as Residor, and when you are a very small owner-operator, I mean only 35 properties, definitely private-owned company, the parameters you are playing with are really different. So if you do not pay attention to the parameters that are important for your partners, definitely you are going nowhere. So that's the first point. And the second point is probably the timing. Because definitely when you are going to deal with a problem with an operator, first of all, you feel that the problem is going to happen. You see the situation is going to be bad, but you can't move. And then there will be a window where you can move, you can speak, you can act with them. And definitely this is really difficult to identify the precise moment where you can move. And you can move with a public company because of strategic things that have been done in the company with the board of the management board and so on. And definitely it's not part of your business, but you have to feel that and to understand that in order to be in the right position to make things move in the good way.
Right. I think beyond what has been said, I think the only other point I would add is many times we talk about what we do and we don't in between the relations, and the relation in between owners and operators. I think the element I found extremely important was define extremely clear who has the ownership inside the company. Because there is a moment where, you know, it's very important to decide who owns the decisions internally and who decides, and who is just a stakeholder. So who is the leader and who is the stakeholder? Because I think we found during the negotiations or during the follow-up that many times, many people inside is willing to help, but at the end for the other party it's not very clear if it's the asset management, is the development person, is it the country person now, is it the regional person, is it the hotel director, who it is. So I think part of the exercise we did was in different phases of the project, let's be clear on who is the leader, okay, and then who are, however, stakeholders that need to be informed or consulted, but at the end the other party knows extremely clear who will take the decision or who will elevate the point. I think that has helped us a lot, and I think we will continue doing like that.
Yeah, I think that's key to a complex transaction. You need to have a decision maker, one, and then he underwrites, allow me this word, the investment committee or whomever, the board. But it needs to be the face and credible one to understand what he can get internally and then what he can get externally. And that's, you know, how you make things happen. I think in terms of don'ts is, I would say, be opaque. In this situation, it was not the case, obviously, but in others it was, and you end up wasting a lot of time.
Well, that's actually quite an interesting development here from this side, because it wasn't really brought up from a private individual, and here is a private but larger sort of mid-sized company who sort of raised it, and then comes the institutional investor, where obviously the responsibilities and who is actually negotiating, who you're dealing with or against with in a negotiating situation is obviously, the bigger the organization gets, obviously a bigger of a challenge, right? And I think that's probably one of the key takeaways, is to make sure that at the appropriate level you do have people talking to each other, knowing exactly what are the parameters, what kind of they can approve or not approve, or agree to or not agree to in a negotiation process.
Maybe one other thing to share from our experience was when we started asset management, it's not just with Alconquin, which was the first big transaction that we did. We had a couple of other asset management transactions, and what we learned is we sort of look at a partner and then we make assumptions. And what we learned is we have to actually challenge these assumptions, because sometimes we think, this is never going to work. They would never entertain the thought of exiting or reflagging or taking a lease agreement which is signed for another 20 years and renegotiating the terms. And we have successfully done this with a couple of instances. And the important thing was to actually, for ourselves, redefine the parameters and say, let's not just assume because in the past it didn't work, but let's break out of these assumptions and do it against the odds and actually speak with the partner and say, listen, I have an idea. does this work? Could that be something that we could entertain together? And it actually works.
Right. Again, to the floor, any questions? We already, there's one question. Just 1 second until the mic's with you. That's easier for everybody.
Yes. My name is Jim Palmer, based in Dubai, working principally with banks on hotel acquisitions and refinancings of hotels. And we've had a lot of discussion here between operators and owners and things that affect them, but the banks also, in my experience, are getting increasingly interested in how these HMAs work. And one of the issues I would like to ask any of the panel to comment on is the banks that we're working with want to have control of the cash. They want the owners to control the cash, contrary to what's in some management agreements where, typically many operators control the cash at the operating level. So I would like maybe a comment about whether you've experienced this before in your negotiations with banks, because it seems to me in the region I operate, banks are taking a really strong position on this, and they want to see the control of the cash in the hands of the owner, i.e. the borrower. Thank you.
Who wants to sort of...
Never heard about that. I think what is key is the contractual framework up front of agreeing what the working capital of the business is, and the business needs the working capital, and the owner obviously wants to have the benefits of the cash flow generated, but I think there needs to be a framework, and this framework needs to be adhered to. I think what we sometimes come across that in the middle of the relationship, then sometimes banks step in and want to change that, not respecting the original setup or because it was refinanced. And I think the key is to make sure that the underlying operating unit remains flexible, is able to execute its obligation towards employees, owners, towards third-party suppliers, etc. And I think that needs to be protected. When you have an owner who, on behalf of the bank, then interferes and strips the operating business of cash, which then has a negative impact on the operation of the hotel, that's then really an interference which doesn't help anybody.
And I guess it really much depends on where you are, jurisdictions, NDAs, how are the HMAs structured, but again, it's probably a different session we're going into here, but go ahead,
Right.
go ahead,
If
Amy.
the owner has, he's sharing in the incentives, he has clear return expectations. If you're not able to do the day-to-day business and pay the employees and do all the things you need to do on time, that could impact the economics. That ends up, disadvantaging the owner, and that's not good either.
So increasing interest from the banks, I think we certainly see this across the region in terms of understanding what's happening. Interference, I would say, not more than ever, and probably even less understanding more and more what needs to be done, and that the operators can execute their business. Yeah. Any more questions? Right, I think we've 10 minutes over time, and we started a little bit late, but really sort of want to thank the panel for something, as usual, never enough time, but it seems like people trust, structure, and sort of clarity in terms of communication, who can do what, and within the partnership seems to be reasons for success. And don't make false assumptions. Don't think about think you know your component better than yourself. Is probably another one to take away. And overall, I guess it's all about sitting around the table, understanding each other, making sure. Coming back to what we are, people's business, that the people around the table connect and can work it out. Thank you very much, Amy. Gentlemen, hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.